Graduation night, I was left at the bus stop with a crumpled $10 bill and a simple, "Be independent." 10 years later, I returned in a black limo, the door opening softly like a full stop. They asked what road I took. I whispered, "The road I drew myself. My name is Jocelyn Nunez. I was 18 years old." The light above me buzzed, a sickly orange sodium lamp fighting the new darkness. It popped and fizzled, attracting a frantic cloud of summer moths that beat themselves against the hot glass. I stood under it, on the gravel shoulder at the absolute edge of Maple Ridge, Ohio. The air was still thick with the smell of cut grass and ozone from the graduation ceremony. The cheap polyester of my graduation gown clung to my skin, already damp. The ceremony felt like it had happened 100 years ago. It was maybe an hour. The SUV, our family's metallic gray fortress, idled on the pavement just beyond the gravel. The sound was a low rumble, impatient. My father, Mark, was at the wheel. He stared straight ahead, through the windshield, at the dark county road. The passenger window slid down with a quiet electronic hum. My mother, Elaine, leaned across the seat. She didn't look at my face. She looked at my hands. "Well, this is on the way for us," she said. Her voice was practical, as if she were discussing a grocery stop. "We're heading to the celebration dinner at the grill. You know Chloe loves their ribs." She held something out the window, a piece of paper, folded small. "Your father and I feel it's time you become independent. Jocelyn, you've graduated now." I took the paper. It was a $10 bill, worn, soft at the creases. From the back seat, my sister Chloe made a sound, a small pop. She was chewing gum, strawberry-scented. I could smell it from the gravel, a sweet, artificial cloud mixing with the diesel fumes of the idling engine and the damp earth. She was already out of her own gown, wearing something bright. She looked at me, her smile thin, non-existent, just a stretching of the lips. Then she looked down at her phone, her thumb already scrolling. "It's time to be practical," my mother added. Her hand retracted, and the window began its smooth journey back up. "Wait," I said. The word was small, dry. But the window sealed. The lock clicked. My father put the car in gear. Chloe didn't look up. My mother faced forward. My father checked the side mirror, looking for traffic that didn't exist, looking anywhere but at the bus stop. The SUV door slammed shut on my life. It was a heavy final sound. The perfume Chloe wore, that expensive scent they'd bought her for prom, lingered in the air for a second. A ghost in the road dust kicked up by the tires. I stood there, holding the $10. I didn't move. I watched the taillights. 2 red eyes, shrinking. They moved down the road, hit the slow curve by the old water tower, and then they were gone. The sound of the engine faded, replaced by the buzzing of the lamp and the first distant rumble of thunder. They were gone. It wasn't a thought. It was a physical sensation, a hollowing out, a sudden, sharp cold in my chest, as if someone had reached in and removed something vital. I had just graduated. I had excelled. I had done everything they'd never asked me to do, hoping it would make them see me. And now, I had graduated from them. This was the real commencement. I looked down at my other hand. I was clutching a large, clear plastic bag. Inside was my diploma, the heavy cardstock embossed with the school's gold seal. A drop of rain hit the plastic, then another. I reached into the pocket of my dress, under the gown, my phone. The screen was black. I'd forgotten to charge it, too busy trying to iron my gown and pin Chloe's hair. The battery had died sometime during pomp and circumstance. It was a useless black rectangle. My luggage was at my feet, a single, small canvas duffel bag. It held 2 changes of clothes, a toothbrush, and my textbooks. It was as small and sparse as their silence had always been. The rain was starting to pick up, a fine, cold mist. The orange light of the sodium lamp seemed to buzz louder, angrier. A digital sign above the small shelter flickered. The red LEDs were partially burnt out, but I could read the words. Next bus, 10:45 p.m. 10:45 p.m. I looked at the clock on the bank across the street. It was 9:15, more than an hour. I stepped under the small, three-sided shelter. It smelled of rust and old urine. There was a metal bench, cold and unforgiving. I sat down, the metal biting through the thin fabric of my dress. This, I thought, this is the first bed of my independent life. A memory flashed, bright and sharp as the lightning that was now splitting the sky to the west. It was a Tuesday, maybe 6 months ago. Dinner. The light in our dining room always seemed to find Chloe, catching the blonde highlights in her hair. She was talking about her art project, some abstract painting, and my parents were hanging on her every word. Mark was nodding. Elaine was smiling, asking questions. I was at the end of the table, near the kitchen, the guest spot. I was the folding chair they brought out when company came, only I lived there. I heard back from the university today, I said, my voice cut through Chloe's description of her brushstrokes. 3 heads turned, 3 pairs of eyes, all blinking, as if emerging from a bright light. Oh, my mother said. I got in, I said, my voice gaining a little strength. The systems engineering program, with a partial scholarship. There was a silence. Chloe took a drink of her soda. My father cleared his throat and cut his steak. My mother, Elaine, sighed. She put down her fork. Jocelyn, that's too far away. We talked about the community college here, and engineering. That's not really for girls. It's difficult. Be realistic. Be realistic. The 2 words that had defined my entire existence in that house. Be realistic about your grades not mattering as much as Chloe's feelings. Be realistic about needing new clothes when Chloe needed a new laptop. Be realistic about wanting to be seen. But it's what I'm good at, I'd argued, weakly. It's a good program. If you want to go. My father, Mark, said, his voice flat, not looking up from his plate. You pay for it yourself. Your mother and I have Chloe's university fund to think about. We can't afford to send both of you. Chloe was already accepted to the local state college art program. Her fund was full. Mine was empty. It had always been. It wasn't advice. It was a sentence, a life sentence, handed down between bites of pot roast. The conversation had ended. Chloe started talking about a boy in her class. The light swung back to her. I was back in the shadows, at the end of the table, the folding chair. The memory vanished, erased by a loud crack of thunder. The sky opened up. The mist turned into a heavy, driving rain, slashing down, hammering on the thin tin roof of the bus shelter. It was a sound like 1,000 angry drums. I pulled my duffel bag closer, tucking it under my legs to keep it dry. My hand, still clenched, opened. The $10 bill was damp with my own sweat. I unfolded it carefully. George Washington looked back at me, his expression stern, judging. $10. This was my inheritance, my severance package, my seed funding. The bitter joke made a small, tight knot in my throat. I folded the bill again, carefully, into a small, tight square. I pushed it deep into the tiny pocket of my jeans, the one under the graduation gown. It felt like a small, hard stone against my hip. The hiss of air brakes sliced through the sound of the rain. A bus, its lights cutting through the downpour, pulled up to the stop. The doors folded open with a pneumatic sigh. The driver, a heavy-set man with a tired face, looked down at me. "You getting on, kid?" he yelled over the storm. I looked up at him, at the warm, dry light inside the bus. There were 3 other passengers, all sleeping, their heads against the windows. "Where does this go?" I asked. He shrugged. "East Loop, ends downtown." Downtown. What was downtown? More empty streets? I had no destination. I only had an origin, a place I had to get away from. I shook my head. "No, I'm waiting for another one." He looked at me for a long second. He saw the gown. He saw the rain. He saw the dark. He sighed. Probably figured I was a runaway or a drunk prom kid. He pulled the lever. The doors hissed shut, and the bus pulled away. sending a tidal wave of gutter water splashing against the shelter. I was alone again. The wind drove the rain sideways. Under the roof, the metal bench was soaked now. My legs were freezing. I looked around, desperate. On the ground, mashed into the gravel, was a torn, half-soaked flyer. Someone's lost advertisement for the county fair. I picked it up. It was soggy. The colors running, but it was a layer. I smoothed it out as best I could and laid it on the bench. I sat down on top of it, a thin, useless barrier of paper between me and the cold steel. It was pathetic. It was everything. The rain settled into a steady, relentless drumming. The world shrank to the small, three-sided box, the buzzing orange light, and the smell of wet pavement. From the trees across the road, a wall of sound started up. The cicadas, 1,000 insects, singing their own harsh, desperate song into the night. The buzzing lamp, the drumming rain, the screeching cicadas. It was a new rhythm, the breathing of my new life. I leaned my head back against the cold, corrugated metal wall of the shelter. I closed my eyes. The words formed in my throat, but I didn't say them aloud. I didn't have to. They were for me. If no one will drive me, I whispered to the storm, my voice so low it was just a vibration in my own chest. If no one will give me a road, I will draw the map. I didn't know what it meant. Not really. It was just a feeling, a hard, cold resolve that settled into the space my family had carved out of me. The hours passed. The cold seeped into my bones. My gown was soaked through, heavy as lead. I shivered, my teeth chattering so hard my jaw ached. I must have drifted off, not into sleep, but into a shallow, gray state of exhaustion. I floated in the dark, tethered to the world only by the sound of the rain hammering on the tin roof, a relentless, metallic heartbeat. I woke with a start. The rain had stopped. The cicadas were quiet. A new light was in the sky, not the sick orange of the lamp, but a pale, watery gray to the east. It wasn't sunrise, not yet, but the promise of it. It was the color of a new page. The light illuminated the bus shelter, showing me the rust spots, the graffiti I hadn't been able to see in the dark, the sodden, torn flyer I had been sitting on. It showed me exactly where I was. 18 years old, alone, $10 in my pocket. The first gray light of the morning touched the empty road. It was a starting line. The dawn was coming, and it was placing a bookmark here, at this cold metal bench, at mile zero of a life I never asked for, but which was now the only one I had. The page was turning. The first bus that arrived after sunrise had the word Express on its digital sign. It did not matter. I got on. I paid the $2.50 fare from my $10. I sat at the back, my damp graduation gown heavy on my shoulders, the duffel bag at my feet. I watched Maple Ridge disappear. I watched the county lines blur. I rode until the driver announced the end of the line. "Hollow Bend, ma'am. Everybody off." I stepped out into a town I had never seen before. Hollow Bend. It smelled of the river it was built on, a damp, muddy, industrial scent mixed with diesel. The main street was a line of low brick buildings, a laundromat with fogged-up windows, a pawn shop with guitars and power tools hanging in the dusty glass, a check-cashing place with a flickering neon sign, and a diner, the Harbor and Hearth. It was open. The sign said, 24 hours, and the air around it was thick with the smell of old coffee and frying onions. It was the smell of fuel. It was the smell of people staying awake. I pushed open the heavy glass door. A small bell tinkled. The diner was mostly empty. Just 2 truckers at the counter and a woman in a hairnet wiping down the vinyl booths. She looked up. She was older, her face lined with a permanent expression of exhaustion and sharp intelligence. I walked to the counter. I was still wearing the gown. I must have looked like a ghost or a joke. "What do you want?" Her voice was rough. "A job," I said. She stopped wiping. She looked at me, really looked at me. The soaked gown, the duffel bag, the dark circles under my eyes. She saw the whole story in a single glance. You got experience? I can learn fast. Everyone says that. She tossed the rag into a red bucket. Can you wash dishes? Yes. Can you show up on time? Yes. She pointed with her chin toward the swinging metal doors at the back. Kitchen. Ask for Sal. I walked back. The kitchen was a blast of heat, steam, and noise. A large man, Sal, was grilling bacon, his back to me. A mountain of dirty plates was piled by a deep, steaming stainless steel sink. The lady out front sent me, I said over the sizzle, for the dishwashing job. Sal didn't turn around. You start now? Yes. Aprons are on the hook. Don't get in my way. I found the stack of stiff, gray aprons, tied one around my waist over the gown, and stepped up to the sink. The water was scalding hot, the steam rising in my face. The first plate I picked up was caked in dried egg yolk. I found the sprayer and started. I worked for hours. The water was hot. The grease clung to my skin, and the steam made my hair stick to my face. My feet, still in my damp graduation shoes, were standing in a puddle of gray water that never seemed to drain properly. The skin on my hands pruned, then grew tender, then burned from the industrial-strength soap. They felt raw, like new skin. It was a badge of endurance. This pain was real. It was earned, and it was mine. Late in the afternoon, a delivery driver came through the back door, whistling. He dropped a stack of heavy vegetable crates. He was young, maybe a few years older than me, with kind eyes. He saw me struggling to lift a huge, overflowing bus tray onto the steel counter. Hey, he said, don't lift it. You'll blow out your back. He came over and put his hands on the tray. Slide it. Use the leverage. See? Don't lift. Slide. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. I'm Luis Ramos, he said, wiping his hands on his jeans. I bring the produce. Jocelyn, I managed. You'll get the hang of it. Jocelyn, he smiled and was gone. At the end of what felt like a week, but was only one 10-hour shift, the woman from the front came back. I'm Mrs. Alvarez, she said. She owned the place. She pulled a few bills from a cash box. Minimum wage, no advances, and don't complain. She handed me the cash. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever held. She watched me count it. She watched me look at the door, then at the dark street outside. That look of exhaustion and intelligence deepened. You got nowhere to go, do you? She stated. It was not a question. I shook my head. She sighed. A long, tired sound. She walked me through the kitchen, past the pantry, to a small, cluttered storage area in the back, behind the walk-in freezer. It was filled with boxes of canned tomatoes, huge bags of flour, and restaurant supplies. In a tiny, clear space, there was a folded army-style cot. She pointed to it. You can sleep there, temporary. If the health inspector shows up, you were never here. You disappear. You understand? I understand, I said, the words catching. Thank you. Don't thank me, she snapped, but not unkindly. Just be here at 5 a.m. tomorrow for the breakfast rush, and be clean. That night, I slept on the cot behind the tomatoes, the smell of oregano and yeast in the air. The low hum of the freezer was my lullaby. I was safe. I was warm. I was, for the first time, employed. I bought a small, grid-lined notebook and a cheap pen from the drugstore next door, and I started to watch. My life became a rhythm of steam and data. While my hands were scrubbing pans, my mind was mapping the diner. I started writing things down in the notebook during my 30-minute break, sitting on a flour sack. 6 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. The breakfast rush. Sal gets bottlenecked at the grill. We run out of coffee mugs first. The orders come in too fast for him to clear the ticket rail. 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. Lunch. The construction crew from the Riverfront project. They all want the special. We run out of clean plates by 12:15. 5 p.m. Luis Ramos delivers produce. He always blocks the back door for 10 minutes, right when the dinner prep cooks are trying to bring waste out. I noted the customer habits. The old man in booth 4 always wanted his coffee half full. The truckers at the counter wanted the check before they were finished eating. I saw the kitchen not as a room, but as a system of bottlenecks. The chaos had a pattern. When my first official payday came, a full week's wages, I walked out of the diner and went straight to the discount store. I didn't buy food. I ate the leftovers Sal and Alvarez left for me. I bought 3 packs of new, white cotton socks. I bought a navy blue backpack. They were the first things I had ever owned that were entirely new. Not hand-me-downs from Chloe, not second best. I put them in the locker Alvarez had cleared for me, and I felt a small, strange surge of wealth. On Sunday, my one day off, I found the Hollow Bend Public Library. It was quiet, smelled of floor wax and old paper, and had free computer access. I sat at a terminal and started searching. I didn't look at social media. I didn't look up Maple Ridge. I looked up supply chain management, the term I'd seen on the systems engineering application. I looked up basic Excel tutorials. I couldn't enroll in a course. I couldn't pay for one. But I could download. I found offline lectures, free PDF textbooks, and Excel practice sheets. I saved them all to a cheap USB drive, back in my cot. With a small reading light I'd bought for $2, I started to study. I developed a new habit. My shift started at 5 a.m. I started showing up at 4:40 a.m. I made the first pot of coffee. I organized the clean dishes from the night before, stacking them by Sal's station so he wouldn't have to walk back and forth. My shift ended at 3 p.m. I stayed until 3:20 p.m. I'd pre-soak the heavy-duty pans for the night shift. I'd break down all the cardboard boxes from Luis's delivery so they were flat and ready for recycling. Mrs. Alvarez noticed. She didn't say anything, but I saw her watching. I started writing down every hiccup in my notebook. Every time a server had to wait for a spoon. Every time Sal yelled for a clean pan. Every time the busboys created a logjam at the dish pit. I was at the sink one day during the lunch rush, the trays piling up. We were out of glasses. The servers were getting frantic. The bottleneck was me. I was washing in the order the trays came. Plates, then bowls, then glasses, then silverware. I stopped. I looked at the pile. I looked at the servers. I changed the order. I grabbed the bus tray with all the glasses first. I washed them. A frantic burst of focused energy. Then I did the flat plates, which stacked easily. Then the awkward bowls. The silverware went into the soak last. Within 10 minutes, the bottleneck was clear. The servers had glasses. Sal had plates. The next day, I made it my rule. Glasses first, then flat plates, then bowls, then soak. The flow smoothed out. We didn't run out of glasses again. Mrs. Alvarez came back while I was wiping down the station. "Saw what you did," she said. "Smart." She looked at the notebook sticking out of my backpack. "What's with the book? College girl?" The name stuck. It was a joke, mostly. I was the one person in the diner who hadn't gone, but I was the one with the notes. "Just keeping track," I said. She nodded. "I'll leave the leftover pot roast on the counter," she said, and walked away. She always left the leftovers, a silent contract. I moved out of the storage room after 2 months. I found a tiny attic room above the laundromat down the street. It was cheap. The rent was paid weekly. It was barely a room, just a slanted ceiling and a mattress on the floor, and it always smelled faintly of bleach and fabric softener. But it was mine. I hung my high school diploma on the wall, the only decoration. I folded my graduation gown, the cheap polyester that had been my only coat, and used it as a second blanket on the thin mattress. Lying there at night, listening to the hum of the dryers downstairs, I would study my notes from the diner. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was learning. I was starting to see the invisible lines that connected everything. The chaos wasn't chaos. It was a network. I saw the flow of coffee, from the delivery bay to Luis, to the shelf, to the grinder, to the server, to the customer. I saw the flow of money, from the customer's hand, to the register, to Mrs. Alvarez, to my paycheck, to my attic room. Every minute I saved at the dish pit wasn't just a minute, It was one less minute a server had to wait. It was one less minute a customer was angry. It was one less minute of pain in Sal's back because he had the pan he needed. It was a small, quiet belief, growing in the dark of that attic room. Survival wasn't just endurance. It wasn't just gritting your teeth and getting through the steam. Survival had a technique, and I was going to master it. My world was no longer steam and soap. It was data. My notebook was my most valuable possession. I started seeing Hollow Bend not as a collection of streets, but as a living organism, a network of arteries and veins. And just like any organism, it had habits. It had a pulse. I noticed, for example, that our produce deliveries from Luis were almost always late on Fridays. I started tracking it. I made a new chart. 4 Fridays in a row. He was delayed. I went to the library and looked up the local municipal announcements. Sure enough, the city was doing long-term road work on the river bridge, but only on Friday afternoons to prepare for weekend traffic. I put a small red flag next to Friday in my notebook, a predictable variable. At the diner, I learned other rhythms. I learned the language of precursors. The diner bell had a different ring depending on who pushed the door. The locals pushed it hard. Strangers pushed it cautiously. But my favorite signal was a combination. When I smelled diesel fuel from the back delivery door, followed by the jingle of the front doorbell within 60 seconds, it meant a crew of truckers was about to hit. The driver would come back to use the restroom, and the smell of his rig would waft in just seconds before his 5 buddies walked in the front. It was a warning, an early signal. I'd hear the back door, smell the diesel, hear the front bell, and I would immediately pull an extra rack of coffee mugs and slide them to Mrs. Alvarez before the order was even placed. She saw me do it the first time and raised an eyebrow. The second time, she just nodded. She didn't have to ask. I was no longer just washing the cups. I was anticipating the thirst. My nights in the attic room were my real education. My USB drive was full of downloaded lectures. I wasn't just learning Excel anymore. I was learning the vocabulary of my new world. Last mile delivery, time windows, vehicle routing problem, or VRP. The VRP hit me like a thunderbolt. It was the traveling salesman problem on steroids. How do you visit a set of customers and return home, using the shortest possible path without being late? It was a puzzle. It was the most beautiful puzzle I had ever seen. It was my life at the diner. It was Sal running from the grill to the fridge to the prep station. It was the servers bouncing between 4 tables and the coffee machine. It was Luis Ramos, burning gas and time all over the county. One Tuesday. Luis was dropping off crates, looking exhausted. He was complaining to Sal that a new produce customer, a small grocer, was added to his route, and it was throwing his whole day off. "It's on the other side of the river," he griped. "I have to backtrack 20 minutes just for 1 box of lettuce." That night, I took out my notebook. I had written down all of Luis's regular stops, just from listening to him talk. I sketched a rough map of Hollow Bend and the surrounding county. I put the diner, Harbor and Hearth, as the depot. I marked his stops. I marked the new grocer. He was right. He was driving in a messy loop, then crossing the bridge, then crossing back for his last 2 stops. He was making 2 U-turns on the highway. I looked at the map, and the answer was right there. If he just reordered his last 4 stops, he could cross the bridge once, hit the new grocer, then loop back into town on the county road. No backtracking, no U-turns. I spent an hour with my pencil, calculating the average travel times I'd overheard him quote. The next day, I waited for him. He came in, grumbling about the bridge. "Luis," I said, my voice quiet. I held out the page from my notebook. "Can I show you something?" He looked at me, then at the map. "What's this, college girl? My homework?" "Your route," I said. "You're backtracking at the end of the day. If you go to the new grocer after you hit the retirement home, but before you go to the grill, you can use the county road loop. It should save you, I think, about 25 minutes, maybe more." He stared at the map. He traced the route with his finger. He looked at my neatly drawn lines, my numbered stops. His eyes widened. "How did you—" "I've been driving this route for 3 years." "I just looked at the map," I said. He took the piece of paper. "I'll try it today," he said, his voice skeptical but curious. The next afternoon, he burst through the kitchen doors. He wasn't whistling, he was beaming. 28 minutes, he announced to me, holding up the piece of paper. I saved 28 minutes. I was home before my kids' game for the first time all season. He looked at me with a new respect. "You talk like a dispatcher. Jocelyn, you should be in an office, not a dish pit." A dispatcher, someone who draws the lines. That small victory lit a fire in me. I turned my attention back to the diner. I started plotting the server paths during the lunch rush. They were all colliding at the coffee station. It was a bottleneck. I built a simple color-coded chart in my notebook and showed it to Mrs. Alvarez. It showed the peak demand times for drinks versus food. "If we move the drink station," I explained, my hand tracing the diagram, "over to the short wall, the servers can pick up coffee without crossing the path of the busboys clearing plates. It separates the two flows." She looked at the chart. She looked at the wall. The next Monday, she had Sal and a handyman move the station. The change was immediate. The collisions stopped. The servers were less stressed. I timed it. We were turning tables over 12% faster during the lunch rush. Mrs. Alvarez started giving me the end-of-night accounting to double-check. She said I was good with numbers. I was good with flow. The attic room was my laboratory. The VRP problem wouldn't leave me alone. The free lectures were great, but they were theoretical. I wanted to build it. I started writing pseudocode in my notebook. Simple, logical steps. Start at depot. Get list of end stops. Calculate distance matrix for each possible path. It was crude, but it was a structure. I was trying to write the instructions for a brain that could solve Luis's problem for him. How to find the shortest path with constraints. The constraints were the time windows. The hospital kitchen needed its milk before 7 a.m. The grill didn't accept deliveries after 4 p.m. I wrote a sentence on the inside cover of my notebook. It became my creed. Logistics is the ethics of being on time. Being late wasn't just inefficient, it was a moral failure. It meant Luis missed his son's game. It meant a server was stressed. It meant a customer was unhappy. It meant someone was left waiting at a bus stop. My family had been late. They had failed to be there. I would build a world that was on time. I had been at the diner for almost 6 months. Luis found me one afternoon while I was stacking tomato cans. "Jocelyn," he said, "I was talking to my brother-in-law. He's a manager at a freight company, Northline Haulage. It's not much. It's just a local outfit. But they're swamped. They need someone part-time to help with data entry, just putting routes into the computer. I told him about you. I told him you're the map maker." My heart hammered. "A freight company?" "It's over in the industrial park. The pay is better than the dish pit. You'd just be doing evenings, inputting the next day's runs." He gave me the name, Hank Dobson. I went that evening. The Northline Haulage office was a small, prefabricated building attached to a massive warehouse. The entire place smelled overpoweringly of diesel and stale coffee. I walked in, and a man with a kind, permanently exhausted face looked up from a desk buried in paper. "You're Luis's girl?" he asked. Hank Dobson. His voice was a gravelly sigh. "I'm Jocelyn Nunez. Luis said you needed help with data entry." "I need a miracle," Hank muttered. He pointed to a stack of paper invoices and run sheets. "All these need to go into the system for tomorrow. The drivers they're not happy. We're inefficient. My routes are a mess." He showed me the system. It was ancient, a green-on-black text interface. My job was to take the handwritten lists of stops and type them in the order the drivers had given them. I sat down at the terminal. The first list was for Route 6. It had 15 stops. I looked at the addresses. They were all over the county. I pulled up a map on the library computer I'd used. The route was insane. It crossed the same highway 3 times. I looked at Hank. He was on the phone, arguing with a driver about fuel. I didn't just type the list in. I resorted it. I put all the stops on the west side of the highway together, then all the stops on the east side. I organized them into a clean, logical loop, the same way I had for Luis. I typed the new, optimized route into the system. I did the same for Route 4 and Route 3. By the time I left, my eyes were burning, but the stack of paper was gone. The next evening, I walked into the office. Hank was at his desk. He wasn't on the phone. He was just sitting there, staring at the wall. "Hank?" I asked. He looked up at me. His eyes were wide. "Route 6, he said, his voice quiet. "The driver, A-Rod. He's been with me 10 years. He's my biggest complainer. He came in an hour ago." I braced myself. "A-Rod said," Hank continued, "that it was the smoothest run he's had in his life. He asked if we got a new computer. He was home 40 minutes early." He pointed to the stack of papers on my desk. "Do that again. Do that for all of them." I had a new job. I still washed dishes in the morning, but my evenings belonged to Northline haulage. My notebook filled with new data, diesel prices, driver hours, loading dock capacity. I started using the library's Excel. I took all the late delivery slips from the past month and built a spreadsheet. I plotted the addresses and the delay times. A pattern emerged, clear as day. I created a heat map. I shaded the cells in Excel, green for on time, yellow for minor delays, red for major delays. A huge cluster of red dots appeared over the west side of the county. Every time it rained, the drainage over there was terrible. The roads flooded. The trucks got stuck. I showed it to Hank. "We're bleeding time in the Western Basin," I said. "Every time it rains, we should reroute the trucks to the highway, even if it's longer. The flooding is costing us more." Hank just stared at the color-coded map. "A heat map," he whispered. "You made a heat map." I was no longer just a dishwasher. I wasn't just a data entry clerk. I was seeing the invisible nervous system of the city. I was finding the blockages, the bottlenecks, the broken connections. My parents had dropped me into chaos. They had left me to follow a route I didn't choose. I stood at the window of the Northline office, watching the trucks back into the bays, their reverse alarms beeping in a steady rhythm. I made a new promise to myself, a quiet one, under the smell of diesel. I would no longer be the person chasing the route. I would be the one who drew it. My life split into 3. It ran on 2 parallel tracks, and at night, I tried to build the bridge between them. 5 a.m., the hiss of the espresso machine at Harbor and Hearth. I was the first one in. I no longer washed dishes. Mrs. Alvarez had promoted me. I ran the morning register, my hands smelling of coffee grounds and receipt paper. I still watched the flow. I saw the bottleneck at the toast station. I saw the way the servers bunched up. My mind, now trained, automatically rerouted them. 3 p.m., the smell of diesel and hot asphalt at Northline haulage. I walked from the diner, changing my shirt in the laundromat bathroom, arriving just as Hank Dobson was starting his second pot of coffee. The office was my real school. The symphony of chaos was my curriculum. 9 p.m., the smell of old paper and floor wax at the Hollow Bend Public Library. My shift at Northline ended, and I would walk the 6 blocks to the library, sitting at a public terminal until they kicked me out at 10. Then I'd go home to my attic room, to my own notes, and study until my eyes burned. Morning at the diner, afternoon at Northline, night at the library, 3 shifts, chained together, a 24-hour cycle of movement. At Northline, Hank's trust in me grew. One day, he pointed to the radio dispatch console. "I'm sick of drivers yelling at me," he said. "You talk to 'em. You seem to understand their language." I didn't, not at first. The first time I keyed the mic, my voice was high. "Hi, A-Rod. This is Jocelyn. I was hoping you could—" A burst of static. "Just give me the address. College girl. I'm burning daylight." I learned that radio talk is a language of pure information. No emotion, no judgment, just data. Route 4, A-Rod. Next stop, 1400 River Industrial, Dock 6. Confirm. Confirmed, he'd grunt. This new language built a new kind of trust. The drivers, who were used to Hank's exhausted yelling, started to talk to me. They'd radio in problems, not as complaints, but as data points. Mapmaker, A-Rod called in one day. The name Luis had given me now spreading. I'm at the way station on I-71. They're flagging me. Say I'm heavy on the rear axle. My heart stopped. A fine for an overload was hundreds of dollars. It would wipe out the profit on the whole run. Stay there, I said. Don't move. What's the load? Machine parts. 3 pallets. Heavy as sin. How are they loaded? Side by side. 2 in the back, 1 up front. I pulled my diagrams from my notebook. Weight distribution. Okay, A-Rod, I need you to break down the pallets. Can you do that? A long, heavy sigh over the radio. Jocelyn, don't make me. Just listen. I need you to move 50% of the weight from the 2 rear pallets onto the front pallet. Then I need you to place them in a triangle formation. The heavy ones centered at the front, the 2 lighter ones behind it, 1 on each side, right over the axle line. A triangle? You're kidding me. It's about weight distribution, not just total weight. Put them in a triangle, reweigh, call me back. I sat there for 20 agonizing minutes, my hand hovering over the mic. The phone rang. It was Hank. I ignored it. The radio crackled. Mapmaker? Go ahead. A-Rod? I'm clear. They let me go. The triangle? It worked. I let out my breath. Good. You're running 30 minutes late. But you'll miss the school zone traffic. You'll make it up. Next stop, 1400 River. Confirmed. Mapmaker. Hank was standing behind me. How in the hell, he whispered, did you know to do that? It's just physics, I said, my hand shaking. My authority grew. I took over the big white board where Hank scribbled his routes. I bought colored markers and magnets. Red for hot loads, blue for standard, yellow for a driver waiting on a dock, green for completed. Hank's chaotic scrawl became a clean, color-coded grid. My God, Hank said, staring at it one afternoon. You're running my 6 trucks like I've got 10. I can see the whole city, right here. But I wasn't perfect. I was still learning. The biggest lesson came from a hospital. We had a priority run. Surgical supplies. They had a hard time window, between 10 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. Any other time. The dock was closed. I routed the truck. I thought I'd given the driver enough of a buffer. I was wrong. A pop-up construction zone. A 10-minute delay. The driver called me at 10:40. They're turning me away. Jocelyn, the dock manager is screaming at me. He says to come back tomorrow. My blood ran cold. Surgical supplies. Not widgets. Not boxes. I called the dock manager. I pleaded. He hung up on me. The supplies went back to the warehouse. We failed. That night, I didn't go to the library. I went to my attic room. I sat at the floor and pulled out my notebook. The failure was a system failure. My system. I wrote a new protocol, a 12-step checklist. 1. Confirm hard window with recipient. 2. Confirm with driver. 3. Check all state and municipal traffic alerts for the entire route. 4. Add a 50% buffer for all medical or priority loads. 5. Identify 3 viable alternate routes. I wrote all 12 steps, and I taped it to the wall. It would not happen again. I would not be the reason a delivery was late. My life at the diner continued, a faded echo of my new one, but I applied my rules there, too. Mrs. Alvarez started a small pie delivery service for holidays. She was losing money on gas. Let me route it, I told her. I took her 10 addresses and built a micro route. It wasn't just about the shortest path. It was about avoiding left turns, minimizing wait times at red lights, and hitting the businesses before the residential. I saved her driver 40 minutes and 2 gallons of gas on the first run. College girl, she said, shaking her head as she counted the receipts. You're gonna own this town someday. I didn't want to own it. I just wanted to map it. One evening, I came home to my attic room, exhausted, and there, in the middle of the small space, was a desk, a real one, old, scarred, heavy dark wood. I froze at the door. Luis was at the bottom of the stairs, smiling. Hank was gonna throw it out, Luis called up. From the storage room, we figured, a mapmaker needs a headquarters. I walked over to it. I ran my hand over the smooth, worn wood. It was the first real piece of furniture I owned. It wasn't a cot behind tomatoes. It wasn't a mattress on the floor. It was a desk. It was a foundation. I sat down at it, and for the first time in a year, I felt like I had a place. My world was my attic room, my desk, my diner shift, and the North Line office. It was small, and it was everything. One night at the library, on my new, faster schedule, I logged into my email to check a new lecture PDF. An old notification from a social media site had slipped through. I never checked it, but the subject line was there. Chloe Nunez shared a photo. My finger hovered over the mouse. Curiosity was a physical pull, an itch. I clicked. The photo loaded. It was Chloe, smiling, her hair blonder. She was in a bright office, holding a glass plaque. The caption read, "So excited to be promoted to junior executive at the firm. Hard work pays off." I looked at the picture. I saw the plush carpet, the expensive art on the wall. I saw her perfect manicure. She was in a world that I couldn't even imagine anymore. A world of soft surfaces and easy victories. I thought of my world, the smell of diesel, the burn of industrial soap, the cold of my attic room. I closed the browser tab. I didn't click her profile. I didn't read the comments. She was on her road. I was on mine. I opened my PDF. My desk at Northline had been just a corner of Hank's, but after the triangle incident, he cleared a whole desk for me in the corner. He put a new, faster computer on it. "This is your spot, Jocelyn," he said. "This is your command center." It was a different kind of family. A family built on competence, not obligation. A family that gave me a desk, not a bus stop. My vocabulary changed. I wasn't just learning Excel. I was at the library, reading about the critical path method. I was in my attic, memorizing the definitions of deadhead miles and cost per stop. I was building a new brain, one that spoke the language of movement. I took a yellow sticky note from Hank's desk. I wrote 3 words on it, the sentence that had become my entire philosophy. "On time is kindness." I stuck it to the side of my monitor. It was my North Star. I was standing at the bus stop across from the laundromat, waiting for the crosstown bus to take me to the library. It was November. The air was sharp and cold. A year. I realized it had been exactly 1 year since I had stood at another bus stop, the one in Maple Ridge. 1 year ago, I was a girl with a $10 bill and a dead phone, waiting for a bus that I didn't know where it was going. Now, I was a woman with 2 jobs, a headquarters, and a set of maps. I knew exactly where every bus and every truck was going. I looked at the bus schedule. Taped behind the plastic, I had passed the 1-year mark without breaking. The rhythm hadn't crushed me. It had forged me. I wasn't just surviving. I was advancing. Hank Dobson was not a man who used many words, and he never used words about feelings. One evening, he called me over to his desk, not looking up from his coffee-stained blotter. "I put your name in for something," he grunted. I waited. He rummaged through a pile of invoices and pulled out a brochure. It's a scholarship from the State Trucking Guild for a certification online." I took it. Professional certificate in supply chain and logistics management. It wasn't a 4-year degree. It was practical. It was for people already in the industry. "I told them you're smarter than my last 3 dispatchers combined," he said, finally looking at me. "The application is due Friday. I already sent your recommendation. Don't make me look stupid." I got the acceptance email 2 weeks later. Reading it on the flickering screen at the library, I was in. I had a student ID number, a login, and a password. For the first time, my education wasn't something I was stealing in bits and pieces. It was something I had been granted. The course was like opening a door I had been pounding on for 2 years. All the things I had learned through trial and error, the weight distribution, the bottlenecks, the time windows, they had names, they had theories, they had formulas. And then, in the third module, I saw it, the vehicle routing problem, VRP. It hit me with the force of a physical blow. The lectures I'd downloaded had only described the problem. The certification course showed me the math, the algorithms, Clark-Wright savings, ant colony optimization, ways to ask a computer to test millions of possibilities in a fraction of a second. My mind was on fire. I sat in my attic room, the laptop balanced on my wooden desk, and I felt my world tilt. I had been trying to solve the VRP with a pencil and a paper map. I had been the ant, walking the path. This course was teaching me how to be the person who sees the whole colony, the whole map, from above. The problem, the lecturer explained, wasn't just finding the shortest path. It was about finding the most efficient path, given a set of constraints. Constraints. My life was a series of constraints. The $10 bill, the bus schedule, the hours in a day, the temperature of the dishwater. The VRP was my life, written in the language of mathematics, and if it was math, it was solvable. My Excel spreadsheets and my paper notebooks were no longer enough. The all-nighters, which had been about survival, now became about creation. I used the money I'd saved from my dual jobs. I didn't move out of the attic, but I bought a refurbished laptop, a heavy old thing with a slow processor, and I started to code. Not just pseudocode, but real code. I taught myself a simple scripting language. My first program was a disaster. It just crashed. But I remembered the 12-step checklist I'd written after the hospital failure. I applied the same logic. I broke the problem down. First, just make it calculate the distance between 2 points. I did that. Then, make it read a list of 10 points. I did that. Then, make it calculate the distance of a route, in the order I typed it. Finally, the leap. Make it decide the order. I built a simple, ugly tool. It was just a single web page that ran on my laptop. It had 2 text boxes, one for the depot address, one for the list of stops. You'd paste them in. You'd hit a button that said, Calculate. I needed a name for the project folder. Routing. HTML was too simple. I thought about Luis, about A-Rod, about Mrs. Alvarez. My goal was to make their lives easier, to be considerate of their time. It was about being kind. I named the file rootkind, HTML. It was my secret, my obsession. I'd work the morning shift at the diner, my mind calculating array functions. I'd work the evening shift at Northline, manually entering routes, all while mentally debugging my own code. Then I'd go home and code until 3 a.m. It was time to test it. I went to Luis. He was my first believer, my patient zero. Luis, I said, can I see your delivery manifest for tomorrow? He handed it to me. 12 stops. I typed the depot and the 12 addresses into my rootkind interface. I clicked Calculate. The screen flickered, and a new list appeared, an ordered list. Can you just try this? I asked, printing it out. Just for tomorrow. Follow this exact order. He shrugged. Why not? Mapmaker? Can't be worse than Hank's. He came to the diner the next day, not for a delivery, but as a customer. He sat at the counter and waited for me. He was holding his fuel receipt. Jocelyn, he said, his voice low and serious. I don't know what voodoo you put in that list, but I'm usually near empty by the end of the day. Today, I'm over a quarter tank full. We tracked it. I gave him a new list every day for 3 days. We compared his fuel logs. His fuel consumption dropped by 18%. On the 3rd day, a clear run with no traffic, it dropped by 22%. It was real. I took it to Mrs. Alvarez. She was running her holiday pie deliveries. I took her list of 30 addresses. Rootkind spat out a route that grouped the deliveries into 3 clean loops. She saved her driver, who she paid by the hour. Nearly 90 minutes. She saved on gas. She gave me a $50 bonus. But the real world was messy. Rootkind was built for a perfect world. "Jocelyn," A-Rod's voice crackled over the radio at Northline. "Your magic list is sending me to 1400 North Avenue, but the package says 1400 North Street. I'm in the wrong zip code." I had a new problem. Address validation. Fuzzy matching. I went back to the code. I added a new module that checked for common errors. Ave sense seat. It would log the error and flag it for me. Then, the hospital problem. My new algorithm was fast, but it was dumb. It didn't know that the hospital dock closed at 10:30 a.m. I added a new feature. Time windows. Now, next to each address, the dispatcher could add an earliest and latest time. My algorithm had to get more complex. It wasn't just finding the shortest path. It was finding the best path that respected those constraints. I wrote in soft penalties for being late. My little tool was growing a brain. I was running it off my own laptop for Hank and for the diner, but Luis had been talking, the flower shop he delivered to, the one that was always complaining about gas for their van, asked him about the map girl. I walked in, my refurbished laptop in my backpack. I showed the owner. "How much?" he asked. I had no idea. $50? I blurted. "A month? For the routing?" $50? My gas bill is $800. Deal. That was my first paying customer. The bakery down the street was the second. A small plumbing company was the third. I had 5 small businesses, $250 a month. It was more than I was making at the diner. I quit the diner. Mrs. Alvarez hugged me. "I told you, college girl," she said. "Go run the world." Then Luis made another introduction. He didn't just deliver to small businesses. He delivered from a major supplier, McKenna Produce, a regional distributor with a fleet of 30 trucks. I went to their warehouse. It was like Northline, but 10 times bigger. The dispatch manager listened to my pitch, my hands shaking. "This Rootkind," she said. "You're a kid. You're telling me you can route my entire 30-truck fleet across 3 states better than the guys I've got who've been doing it for 20 years? "I am," I said. "It's not about me. It's about the math. Let me show you. Give me yesterday's routes, the ones that are already done. Let me see how I can beat them." I ran their routes. My little laptop chugged for 10 minutes. The result? I could have saved them, in total, 430 miles. They offered me a 1-year contract. I went back to my attic room. I downloaded a legal contract template. I filled in the blanks. I printed it at the library. I sat at my wooden desk, the one Luis and Hank had given me. I looked at the line. Founder? My hand was trembling. I signed it. Jocelyn Nunez, founder, Rootkind. I took the first check from McKenna Produce. I didn't cash it right away. I scanned it. Then I went to the discount store and bought a cheap $5 document frame. I took the $10 bill from my wallet. It was soft, faded, the creases like scars. It had lived in my pocket. Then my wallet, for over 2 years, my seed funding. I put the scanned contract in the frame, and in the bottom right corner, I carefully placed the $10 bill, its edge overlapping the signature line. I put it on my desk, my past and my future, sharing a frame. McKenna Produce almost killed my system. My simple website couldn't handle 30 trucks and hundreds of stops. The calculate button would spin for 30 minutes. It wasn't scalable. I was back at the library, back in the online certification forums. I wasn't a coder, I was a systems architect. I had to learn. I moved the logic from the web page to a worker queue on a server. The dispatcher would submit the routes, and a worker program would pick it up, process it, and email the results. I built a simple dashboard so they could see the status. Pending, processing, complete. It was robust. It was getting smarter. Then the summer storms came, the big one, the one that flooded the Western Basin every year, the one I'd mapped for Hank. An alert came over the radio at Northline. A-Rod is stuck. The water's rising on the County Line Road. My new system was proactive. But it wasn't reactive. It couldn't change a route that was already in progress. I didn't sleep for 72 hours. I built a new module, an emergency module, a reroute all button. I fed it live data from the National Weather Service. If a flash flood warning was issued for a specific area, my system would automatically scan all active routes. If a truck was heading toward that area, it would flag it and automatically calculate a detour path. A week later, a smaller storm hit. A driver from McKenna, a guy named Mike, was on his route. A flash flood warning popped up. The dispatcher saw the alert in the system. She hit the new reroute button on Mike's tablet. A new route loaded, turning him north, onto the highway, avoiding the basin. I was asleep at my desk, my face stuck to my notebook. An email notification woke me. It wasn't from the dispatcher, it was from Mike. Subject, thank you. Ma'am, I don't know who you are, but my dispatcher said you're the one who built the system. I was on the 401 and I was heading to that underpass that always floods. My tablet just lit up and gave me a new route. I was annoyed, but I took it. When I got to the next drop, I heard on the radio that the 401 is underwater. I would have been stuck for hours. I'm on my way home now, in time to see my kids' t-ball game. So, thank you. I printed that email. I taped it to the wall above my desk. This was the second motivation. The first was my own survival. The second was this. It wasn't just about saving fuel. It was about t-ball games. My dashboard was getting more advanced. I wasn't just sending lists. I was integrating with the truck's cheap GPS units. One night, I launched the new dashboard. It was a map of Ohio, and on it, there were dots. 42 dots, from Northline, McKenna, and my other clients. 42 blinking green dots, moving in the dark. I watched them, mesmerized. They were like fireflies. They were moving along the paths I had drawn. They were following my logic. It was a quiet, beautiful symphony. I wrote a new sticky note and put it on my monitor, right over the "On time is kindness" one. Right load, right time, right road. This was my new company's mantra. And I knew route kind wasn't the right name anymore. It was too small, too gentle. We weren't just being kind. We were finding the way. We were tracing the path, even when it was dark, even when it was flooded. I went online and registered a new business name, TracePath. I liked the sound of it, TracePath Systems, because it wasn't just a map. It was a system for moving forward. My real-time map was no longer just Hollow Bend. It was not just Ohio. The blinking green dots, my fireflies, had crossed the border. I watched them move through the night, tiny pinpricks of light tracing paths across the dark sprawl of Pennsylvania. I would stand at my desk in the attic, my headquarters, and zoom out. The map was a dark sky, and the trucks were my constellation. I was watching a new zodiac being drawn, a pattern of commerce and commitment. My first client, Northline Haulage, was now my most dedicated user. Hank Dobson had officially retired his chaotic whiteboard. My system, which he still called the map maker, was now the brain of his operation. His productivity, he told me, was up 30%. His fuel costs were down. His drivers were happier. "Jocelyn," he'd said to me, signing the full enterprise contract, "I had to buy 2 more trucks. You're making me so efficient. I'm actually growing. I'm scared to death." But the growth taught me new things. Hank wasn't just hauling machine parts anymore. He'd landed a contract with a medical supply distributor. "This is different, Jocelyn," he said, his voice serious. "This isn't just about being on time. This is oxygen, insulin. This stuff is life or death. I can't have your system send it on a fast route if it's not the sure route." He was right. On time is kindness was not enough. Sometimes, on time was survival. I went back to the code. I built a new layer, a priority layer. Now, a dispatcher could flag a load as medical priority. My algorithm changed. It would automatically deprioritize everything else. It would select the route with the fewest stoplights, the best maintained roads, and the lowest traffic probability. Even if it was 3 miles longer, It would automatically assign that load to the most reliable truck and the most senior driver. Oxygen and insulin, I decided, would always get the right of way. The system was tested not by a client, but by a disaster. The river, the one that defined Hollow Bend, flooded. It crested its banks after 3 days of relentless spring rain, turning the entire western basin, the one I had mapped so long ago, into a churning brown lake. The old highways were gone, submerged. Whole towns were cut off. The county's emergency response team was overwhelmed. They had supplies, but their maps were useless. Their drivers were getting stuck. Turning back, Luis, who was now volunteering, running produce in his own truck for the Red Cross, called me. "Jocelyn, they can't get through," he said, his voice frantic over the phone. "They're trying to use GPS, but the roads aren't there anymore. They need your maps. They need to know the roads that are still clear. Right now." I called the head of the emergency operations. "My platform," I said. "It's already rerouting my clients around the flood zones. I'm using live data. Give me your destinations. Give me your supply depots. I'll route your trucks." For 4 days, I didn't sleep. I gave the EOC free access to the platform. I manually entered the coordinates of isolated shelters, of houses where I knew people were trapped. My system, designed for commerce, became a lifeline. It guided relief trucks down obscure county roads, through farm lanes, across bridges that were still holding. We weren't delivering packages. We were delivering blankets, water, and medicine. When the water receded, I had an email from the county commissioner. It was a thank you. It was also a contract offer. TracePath Systems, I had officially filed the name change, was now a vendor for county emergency services. The money from the McKenna contract, and now the county, was real. The attic room was no longer a headquarters. It was a bottleneck. I needed a real office. I found a space in Port Raleigh, a fictional name for a very real industrial park on the edge of a new city. It wasn't a sleek glass tower. It was a renovated warehouse, all exposed brick and old timber. With a high ceiling and a concrete floor, I rented a corner of it, 1,000 square feet of open space. I bought desks, real ones, not salvaged. And I hired people. This was the strangest part. I was no longer just a founder, I was a boss. I hired 2 developers, coders who were smarter and faster than I had ever been. I hired an analyst, a woman named Sarah, who could see patterns in data that I missed. I hired a dispatcher, a veteran from a national firm, to handle client support. I hired a part-time lawyer to read my contracts, and a part-time administrator. And I hired an intern, a quiet kid from the local community college, who reminded me a little too much of myself. 12 people, my team. I walked in on the first day we were all there. The sound of keyboards, of a phone ringing, of my developers arguing happily about a database query. It was the sound of a real company. We had to build a culture. I thought about the late nights, the all-nighters, the 72-hour push for the flood. "I have one rule," I said at our first all-hands meeting, which was just us standing by the coffee machine. "We don't brag about all-nighters. We don't celebrate working 80-hour weeks. That's a sign of failure. It means our system is broken. It means we have alarms. I want us to brag about fewer alarms. I want us to brag about being so good, so efficient, that we can all go home at 6 p.m. My developers stared at me. Then one of them, the lead, a guy named Ben, slowly smiled. "I can work with that," he said. We were growing fast, too fast. The flood response had put us on the map, literally. And with growth came a new kind of visitor. Investors. Men in expensive suits started showing up at the warehouse. They'd look at our brick walls, at our cheap coffee machine, and they'd talk about scaling and burn rate and Series A. They saw a rocket ship. They wanted to strap themselves to it. One man, a partner at a big Silicon Valley firm, offered me a check on the spot. It had a lot of zeros. "We'll install a new management team," he said smoothly. "Scale this to $1 billion valuation and exit in 5 years. You'll be rich beyond your wildest dreams. Jocelyn." I looked at the check. I thought about his words. Exit. New management. What about my clients? I asked. What about the medical priority? What about the emergency services? He waved his hand. We'll focus on the high-margin enterprise clients. Streamline. You can't be everything to everyone. He wanted fast money. He wanted to build a fast road, pave over the small clients, and get to the end. I thought about my own philosophy. Right load, right time, right road. I'm not interested in fast money, I said, sliding his unsigned term sheet back across the table. I'm interested in right-track money. I'm building a system, not a slot machine. Thank you for your time. He left, baffled. My team heard. The story went around the office. I hadn't realized I was being tested, and I hadn't realized I had passed. But the encounter changed me. I wasn't just building a company. I was building a kind of company. I looked at my first intern. He was smart, hungry, but I saw the way he nursed the same cup of coffee all day. I saw his worn-out shoes. I knew that look. He was running on empty, with no safety net. I went to my new administrator. I'm setting up a new fund, I said. It's internal. Call it the bus stop fund. What's it for? It's for any intern or employee who doesn't have a family to call, I said. It's for a car repair. It's for a security deposit on an apartment. It's for a new pair of shoes. It's a no questions asked. Pay it back when you can grant. It's the safety net I never had. With growth came complexity. My 12 employees couldn't all be me. They couldn't just know the right answer, the way I had learned it, in the steam and the diesel. I had to standardize. I had to write the playbook. I spent a week writing. I didn't write code. I wrote down my philosophies. The 12-step checklist for the hospital failure. The triangle for the overweight load. The legal ethical shortcuts for navigating city dockyards. I wrote down the on time is kindness mantra. I created the TracePath Systems Operations Playbook. It was our company's DNA. Written down. The company was no longer me in an attic. It was TracePath Systems, a legal entity, a brand, a promise. And the clients kept coming. We weren't just a local Ohio company anymore. We were regional. We crossed 1,000 clients. The 1,000th client wasn't a massive corporation. It was a network of rural health clinics in West Virginia. Their product was medicine. Their deliveries were nurses in four-wheel drive vehicles, visiting patients in remote mountain homes. Their KPI was not cost per mile. Their KPI, the one they wrote into the contract, was prescriptions not late. I flew out to meet them. I sat in their small office. The director, a woman who looked as tired as Hank Dobson ever had, told me, Mr. Nunez, if our nurse is 10 minutes late, our patient, who is 70 years old and alone, might miss their insulin. Your system isn't a convenience for us. It's a heartbeat. It's Jocelyn, I said, and I understand. I went back to the office. I pinned their contract to the wall. This, I told my team, is our new benchmark. We are in the business of prescriptions not late. Our office filled up. On the main wall, opposite the entrance, I built our real dashboard, a massive, wall-mounted screen that showed the map of the East Coast. It was dark, and the blinking green dots, now hundreds of them, moved across it. Next to the map, I hung the company's first artifact. It was the cheap, $5 document frame from my attic. In it, the scanned McKenna contract, and below it, the small, faded, impossibly soft $10 bill. My seed funding. It was our legend. Every new employee was told the story of the bus stop, the story of the $10, the story of mile zero. I had a ritual. Every night, before I left the office, I would turn off my own monitor. I'd stand in the dark, and I would just watch the big map on the wall. I'd stand there for 60 seconds. I'd watch the dots move. Each one was a promise. Each one was a driver, like A-Rod, trying to get home. Each one was a package, like an oxygen tank, that needed to be on time. I would listen to the quiet hum of the servers. It was the sound of my system working, the sound of the chaos being tamed. It was the sound of 1,000 synchronized movements, a silent chorus. The blue light of the map would wash over my face. It wasn't the sick orange of the sodium lamp at the bus stop. It was a cool, calm, steady blue. It was the peace, I thought, that only a coordinator can feel. The peace of knowing that everything is on its path, that everything is on time, and that you are the one who drew the map. I had not seen an email from my mother's side of the family in nearly 10 years. The message, when it arrived, was not from them. It was from Aunt Melissa, my father's sister. She was the only one who had ever sent me a birthday card, the only one who had ever asked, in a crowded room, if I was doing okay. The email slipped past my corporate spam filters. A digital ghost. Subject: 10-year family reunion, Maple Ridge Community Center. Jocelyn, it began. She had used my professional email, the one listed on the TracePath website. I know it's been a long time. The family is getting everyone together for a big reunion at the community center. 10 years since you and Chloe graduated. It would mean the world to your grandmother if you came. Everyone is going to be there. 10 years. The number hung in the air of my office. I stared at the blinking cursor. My first instinct was to delete, to archive, to create a filter that would block any email from Maple Ridge forever. What was there to return to? A family that had written me off? A town that had been the starting line for a race I never asked to run? But a different feeling surfaced, a cold, quiet curiosity. My goal, I realized, was not revenge. I had no desire to show up in a flashy car and bright jewels, to rub their noses in my success. That was a scene from a movie, a cheap, unsatisfying fantasy. Revenge was loud. I had built my life on quiet competence. This wasn't about revenge. It was about measurement. I wanted to stand in that room, on that ground, and see what had changed. Had I? Had they? I wanted to see the data. I leaned back in my chair. My part-time lawyer, the one I'd hired to get my own will and finances in order, had sent me a file 2 weeks prior. He had been consolidating my assets, and in the process, had looked into my history. "This is a loose end," he had written. "There was an old college savings account, opened in your name by your grandmother. It had about $5,000 in it. I was going to roll it over, but it was closed out, drained." "When?" I had asked. 10 years ago, he replied. "A few weeks after your graduation. It was emptied by your parents, who were co-signers. I pulled the bank records. The money was transferred directly to a vendor, a company that, it seems, was contracted to help with your sister Chloe's first failed business venture. A boutique, it looks like, one that went under in 6 months." I had stared at the PDF, the bank statement, the transfer. My college money, the small fund my grandmother had built, the money that could have paid for a dorm room, for books, for a bus ticket to a university, not away from my life. It had been used to save Chloe's failing project. The betrayal was a cold, sharp stone. It wasn't the $10, which was a symbol of abandonment. This was $5,000. This was theft. This was the foundation of my life being ripped out and handed to my sister, to cushion her fall. My first impulse, the one that rose from the old, cold, 18-year-old self, was to print it, to make copies, to walk into that reunion and hand one to every family member, to humiliate them. But I didn't. I was a systems architect. You don't fix a broken system by yelling at it. You fix it by building a better one. I saved the PDF to a secure, encrypted file. Archive Personal Finance Mr. PDF. It was data. It was an invoice for a debt that would never be repaid in cash. I wouldn't use it to humiliate them. I would find another way to answer. I forwarded Aunt Melissa's email to my administrator. "Get me the director of the Maple Ridge Community Center," I said, "and get me the head of the Maple Ridge School Board." I called the community center director first. "You're hosting the Nunez family reunion," I said, my voice all business. "I want to sponsor it, anonymously, the entire thing, the catering, the lights, the security, the cleanup. I want you to send me the bill, all of it." The director was stunned. Who? Who is this? The sponsorship is from TracePath Systems, I said. The plaque should say, a donation from TracePath Systems in honor of all Ohio communities, no personal names. Next, I called the school board. I'm Jocelyn Nunez, founder of TracePath Systems. I'm a graduate of your high school. I'm launching a new scholarship for your students. I'm endowing it. It's called the Bus Stop Scholarship. The name was for me, just for me. It's not for a valedictorian, I said, my voice hard and clear. It's not for the star quarterback. It's for the student who has no safety net, the one who is aging out of foster care, the one who is working 2 jobs to support their family, the one who, without this, will be left standing alone. I want a permanent plaque. What? What should it say? The superintendent stammered. It should say, the Bus Stop Scholarship, for those who have had to wait alone. I hung up. I had just rerouted the narrative. They wanted a family reunion. I was hosting a civic event. The day of the reunion arrived. I spent the morning in my own home, a quiet condo overlooking a river that was not in Hollow Bend. I did not choose a dress that would scream millionaire. I chose my armor. A simple, severe, perfectly tailored silk dress in a dark charcoal gray, no bright colors, small pearl earrings, the ones I had bought myself after I signed the McKenna contract. My hair was pulled back in a tight professional bun. I was not coming as their lost little girl. I was not coming as a victim. I was coming as the founder of TracePath Systems. I was coming as myself. At 5 p.m., my transportation arrived. I had rented a black Lincoln Town Car, a limo. It was not for flash. It was for the symbol. 10 years ago, I had been put in a vehicle, then ejected from it. My transportation had been chosen for me. Tonight, I was choosing. I was not being driven. I was being chauffeured. This vehicle would not abandon me. It would wait. It had a schedule. My schedule. The Maple Ridge Community Center, I told the driver, but I want to make a stop first. I gave him the address, the old intersection, mile 0. We pulled up to the bus stop. The sun was setting, casting the same long, lonely shadows. The town had repainted the bench. It was a bright, chemical green now, a pathetic attempt to cover the rust. But the graffiti was already back. The schedule was still in the plastic case. I got out of the car, my heels sinking into the soft gravel. The driver watched me, his face impassive. I walked up to it. The red LED letters were gone, replaced by a simple printed sheet. But the time was the same. Next bus, 10:45 p.m. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the evening air. Time was a flat circle. A girl could be standing here, right now, in the same polyester gown. I got back in the limo. The leather was cool and smooth. My driver had left a small bouquet of wildflowers on the back seat, a standard for the limo service. I picked them up. I would give them to Aunt Melissa. A private signal, from me to her. I pulled out my phone. I had drafted a speech. The first draft was a bitter, angry thing. It named names. It detailed the $10, the $5,000. It was a weapon. The second draft was cold. A list of my accomplishments. It was a resume. It was armor. I deleted them both. I opened a new note. I wrote 90 seconds. 90 seconds of gratitude, aimed at the right people. Aunt Melissa, Hank Dobson, Luis Ramos, Mrs. Alvarez, the people who had been my true family, my true logistics chain. I put the phone away. We were 5 minutes out. I opened my purse. My wallet was new, leather, but inside it was a small, plastic-sleeved compartment. In it, folded into its familiar, tight square, was the $10 bill. I had taken it out of the frame. The frame was for the office, for the legend. The bill itself was for me. It was my anchor. It was my reminder. I touched the soft, worn paper through the plastic. I took a deep breath. I looked at the GPS on the driver's console. We were on time. Of course we were. Justice, I whispered to myself, is sometimes just a schedule. We pulled up to the community center. The parking lot was full. I could see them. Through the big glass doors, silhouettes, a crowd of people, my past, all gathered. My driver got out. He walked around to my door.
"We're here, Ms. Nunez," he said.
I heard the door handle click. The door swung open. A smooth, silent hydraulic motion. The noise of the party spilled out, laughter, music. And then, a silence. The heads turned. One by one. They saw the long, black car. They saw the open door. They saw my foot, in a simple gray heel, step out onto the pavement. Their eyes, all of them, my mother, my father, my sister, my aunts, my uncles, their eyes all focused on me, a sudden, sharp, collective wave of attention. I stood up, pulling my dress smooth. I had arrived. I walked through the glass doors. The hall was exactly as I remembered, a place of high school dances and awkward town meetings, but tonight it was transformed. The lighting was warm, golden, casting a soft glow on the tables. Someone, my company, I realized with a strange detachment, had paid for good catering. The smell of real food, not cheap potluck, filled the air. And there, on an easel by the entrance, was the first sign, a large, professionally printed welcome board. At the bottom, in clean, sharp corporate font, tonight's event is made possible by the generous sponsorship of TracePath Systems. A volunteer, a woman I didn't recognize, sat at a folding table with a box of name tags. "Welcome. Last name?" "Nunez," I said. She ran her finger down the list. Nunez. Ah, here we are. She pulled a tag. "Oh, you're with the sponsor." She handed it to me. The sticker was white. The name was printed in bold. Jocelyn Nunez, TracePath Systems. I peeled the back and pressed it to the silk of my dress. My name, followed by my company, a new identity, an equation. I stepped into the noise. The room was loud with laughter and conversation. A sea of faces I knew and half knew. I saw my mother, Elaine, first. She was holding a glass of white wine, laughing at something my father, Mark, said. She looked the same, softer, perhaps, but the same. Nearby, my sister Chloe was holding court with a group of cousins. She was on her phone, showing them a picture, her smile wide and bright, a practiced, public-facing smile. My mother's eyes swept over me, a quick, dismissive glance, the kind you give to the catering staff. She didn't recognize me. Her eyes passed over my face and my name tag, and she turned back to my father. I heard Chloe's voice. "Oh, that's just the rep from the sponsor," she said to a cousin who was looking at me. "TracePath, some tech company. I guess, tacky to put their name on everything." She laughed and went back to her phone. The folding chair, the girl in the polyester gown, the dishwasher, and now, the rep. I had always been a function to them, never a person. "Jocelyn?" The voice cut through the noise. I turned. Aunt Melissa. She stood there, her hands clasped. She was older, grayer, but her eyes were the same, sharp and kind. She had been the only one. She didn't wait. She crossed the 3 feet between us and wrapped her arms around me in a tight, fierce hug. She smelled of the same perfume, the one like cloves and comfort. "My goodness," she whispered, pulling back to hold my shoulders. She looked at me, really looked. She saw my face. "Jocelyn, honey, look at you. You are so grown up." It was the way she said it, the way she had always said my name, as if it mattered. "Hi, Aunt Melissa," I said, my voice thick. "I am so glad you came," she said, her eyes wet. "I am so proud of—" She gestured. At me, at the room. Before she could finish, the lights dimmed slightly. A man I didn't know, the town council president, was stepping up to a small podium on a riser. "Good evening, everyone. Good evening," he said into the microphone, his voice booming. "It's so wonderful to see the whole community out tonight." He welcomed everyone. He thanked the reunion committee. He made a few jokes. I stood with Aunt Melissa. her hand on my arm, a warm, solid weight. "And we have a very special announcement tonight," the MC continued. "As you know, our town is strong, but we have kids who fall through the cracks. We've always wanted to do more, and tonight we can—" The room grew quiet. Thanks to an incredibly generous endowment from a new partner, I am thrilled to announce the establishment of the Maple Ridge Bus Stop Scholarship. A silence fell over the room, a deep, profound, questioning silence. I could hear the hum of the ice machine from the bar. I looked at my family. Chloe had looked up from her phone, a confused frown on her face. "Bus stop?" she whispered. My mother, Elaine, had frozen, her wine glass halfway to her mouth. My father, Mark, was staring at the podium, his posture rigid. "This scholarship," the MC said, his voice filling with emotion, "is a permanent, endowed fund. It is specifically for students graduating from Maple Ridge High who are stepping out on their own, students from our foster system, students without a family support net, students who are, in all ways, finding their own path." I could feel Aunt Melissa's hand tighten on my arm. "The benefactor of this amazing gift is TracePath Systems, and the founder of that company is, in fact, a Maple Ridge graduate herself. She's here with us tonight. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Jocelyn Nunez." The spotlight, a single, harsh white circle, swung through the crowd and found me. The room was utterly still. The only sound was the clicking of my heels on the parquet floor as I walked from the back of the room, past the tables, toward the podium. Click, click, click. It was the sound of a clock. It was the sound of a countdown. It was the sound of a new schedule being put into effect. I saw my mother's face. The blood drained from it. She finally saw me. She connected the woman in the gray silk dress to the girl in the polyester gown. Her hand, the one holding the wine, began to shake, and she slowly, mechanically, put the glass down on a table. My father looked like he had been struck. He gripped his own empty glass, his knuckles white. Chloe's face was a mask of disbelief. Her practiced public smile was gone, replaced by a slack-jawed, naked shock. The rep, the folding chair, the girl they had left. I reached the podium. I adjusted the microphone. I looked out at the sea of faces, at the single spotlight. I did not look at my family. "Thank you," I said. My voice was clear. It was calm. It did not shake. It was the same voice I used to talk to A-Rod over the radio. The same voice I used to close the McKenna contract. 10 years ago, I said, I graduated from Maple Ridge High. That night, I stood at the bus stop on the edge of town, with $10 and a diploma. The silence in the room was now absolute. It was a vacuum. I waited for a long time. I learned a lot that night. I learned what it means to be independent, and I learned what it means to wait alone. I paused. I let the words sit in the air. "This scholarship," I continued, "is not for me. It is for the next person standing at that stop. It is for the kids who shouldn't have to wait alone. It's for the students who need a different kind of support." I looked over the crowd, my gaze sweeping past my parents, as if they were just two more faces in the crowd. At my company, TracePath Systems, we have a philosophy. We believe that on time is kindness. We believe that the ethics of logistics, getting the right thing, to the right place, at the right time, is a form of compassion. This scholarship is an extension of that. It is an attempt to be on time for someone who needs it. I looked at Aunt Melissa, and she was crying, silently, smiling. "Thank you for having me," I said, "and thank you for supporting these students." I had one more thing to say, my conclusion, my new thesis. "Dawn," I said, "does not always come from forgiveness. Sometimes it comes from simple, relentless, forward movement. Thank you." I stepped back from the podium. For a second, there was nothing, and then the applause started. It wasn't a roar, it wasn't a standing ovation, it was better, it was a wave. Starting from the back, it was Aunt Melissa, it was the school superintendent, it was Luis Ramos, who I saw standing by the bar, grinning, here for my secret. It was Hank Dobson, who had driven down, wearing a suit. It was a sustained, rolling, deeply felt applause from the community. It was the sound of acknowledgement. My mother, my father, and my sister were not clapping. They were statues, frozen in the spotlight's glare. The MC came up. "Thank you," I said. He called up the school superintendent for a photo. They held up a giant, ceremonial check. They tried to pull me into the center. I stepped back. "No," I said, my voice low, "just for them. This isn't about me. This is for the scholarship. Put the community in the photo. Put the teachers." I stepped off the riser, out of the light, and let them have the frame. My work was done. I walked through the side door, out onto the wide wooden porch. The cool night air hit my face. It was a relief, a sudden decompression. I breathed in the smell of cut grass and the faint, damp smell of the nearby river. String lights were looped along the porch railing. I leaned against a post. My limo was parked at the curb, a long, black, patient shape. The string lights reflected on its polished hood like a constellation, like the waves of a calm, dark ocean. My escape pod was waiting, on my schedule. The door opened behind me. It wasn't my parents, not yet. It was two of my cousins, Chloe's age. They had been part of her circle. They approached me hesitantly. "Jocelyn?" one of them said. "Hi," I said. That was pretty amazing," the other one said, shoving his hands in his pockets. "What you said about waiting. The first one said, "We wanted to say thank you for what you're doing. A lot of us. You know, we all had our own bus stops, different kinds. But, yeah, we're glad you're here." "Thank you," I said. They nodded, a new respect in their eyes, and retreated back into the warmth of the party. I was alone for another minute, watching the lights on the car. Then, the side door opened again. The sound was heavy, not. I didn't have to turn around. I knew the footsteps. They came to a stop, a few feet behind me. They were standing together, a united front, just as they had been in the SUV 10 years ago. The unavoidable conversation. My mother, Elaine, my father, Mark. They had finally approached. The silence on the porch stretched out. It was a cold, thin thing, weighed down by 10 years of unsaid words. The party music from inside seemed distant, a different world. Jocelyn. It was my mother, Elaine. Her voice was strained, high. It was the first time she had said my full name, and I realized, my entire adult life. It wasn't Joe or Honey or, more often, just a look in my general direction. It was Jocelyn, the name on the name tag, the name on the sponsorship plaque. I turned slowly to face them. I did not lean against the post. I stood on my own, my posture straight. "Mother, Father, you should have told us," Elaine said, her hands fluttering at her sides. "All of this, the sponsorship, the scholarship, this performance, you could have warned me." I looked at her face, which was pale, confused. She was seeing me as an embarrassment, an inconvenience, a failure in her social scheduling. "You did warn me," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the night air. "You told me everything I needed to know, 10 years ago, at the bus stop." My father, Mark, started. His voice was a low rumble. "We were trying to teach you to be independent, to be strong." "That's the word you use?" I asked. I did not raise my voice. I was a systems analyst. I was isolating the incorrect variable. "Teaching? Independence?" I reached into my purse. I pulled out my wallet. From it, I took the small, plastic-sleeved square. I placed it on the small, high-top table that stood on the porch, between us. The $10 bill sat under the weak glow of the string lights, a piece of irrefutable, physical data. "This was my lesson," I said. "This was my seed funding. This was my inheritance." Mark looked at the small, faded bill, his face, which had been set in a mask of defensive fatherhood, crumpled. "That's not teaching, Father," I said, my voice flat. "Let's call it what it was. It was abandonment." The word hung in the air. It was a word I had never allowed myself to use before. It was a word of judgment, and I had always just stuck to the facts. But this was a fact. "Well, it clearly worked out for you." Chloe. Her voice was sharp, brittle, just like I remembered. She had stepped out of the door, her phone in her hand, her face a mask of anger. She saw me, not as a sister, but as a competitor who had just stolen the spotlight. "Look at you," she said, gesturing to the limo. "The fancy car, the company, the big speech. You won. You got what you wanted. You always had to be the smart one, didn't you? Always had to be the victim." I looked at her. The practiced smile was gone, and what was underneath was raw and mean and frightened. "This isn't a game, Chloe," I said. "This isn't about winning. This is about scheduling. I was on time for those students, that's all." "On time?" she spat. "You humiliated us. You humiliated Mom and Dad." "That's enough." Aunt Melissa. She had come out the door, and with her, leaning on her arm, was my grandmother, my father's mother. She was frail, in a wheelchair, but her eyes were still sharp. Aunt Melissa, however, was not frail. Her voice was a steel blade. "You be quiet, Chloe," she said, stepping forward. "You have no right to speak in this conversation. None." She turned to Mark and Elaine. Her gaze was furious. "Humiliated?" she said, her voice shaking with a decade of suppressed rage. "You're worried about humiliation?" She stood at that podium and she didn't say one single bad word about you. She didn't tell a soul what you did. She pointed at me. "This girl, this woman, raised herself. She raised herself on night shifts in a diner. She raised herself in an attic with borrowed maps. She built a company out of nothing, out of the $10 you left her with. What did you raise? Elaine? What did you two ever raise, except your own comfort levels?" The words landed like punches. My mother flinched. My father stared at the floor. "You used her college money," Aunt Melissa said, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "Didn't you? You used her grandmother's money to pay for your little artist's failed boutique." It was out. The second piece of data. My mother's head snapped up. "Melissa, you don't know." "I do know," Aunt Melissa said. "Your mother told me, before she passed, she was ashamed." My grandmother, in the wheelchair, made a small sound. She reached out a thin, trembling hand toward me. I stepped forward and took it. Her skin was paper. "That night," my grandmother whispered, her voice a dry rustle of leaves, "at the bus stop, I remember. I told them not to. I told them it was wrong." Her eyes, watery and old, found mine. "I'm sorry, child. I was too weak." I squeezed her hand. She was the first one, the only one. A sob broke from my mother. It was not a performance. It was a real, ugly, guttural sound, the sound of a dam breaking. She stumbled back and leaned against the wall, her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. My father, Mark, did not move. He just stared at the $10 bill on the table. He bowed his head. He looked like a man who had just had his spine removed. Chloe, for the first time in her life, was silent. The phone was no longer in her hand. She had slowly, quietly, put it in her pocket. The color had drained from her face. She was seeing, maybe for the first time, the real ledger. I looked at the three of them, the crying mother, the bowed father, the silent sister. I had my answer. I had the data. I did not want an apology. An apology, at this point, would be useless. It would be a new kind of lie, a way for them to feel better, a way to close the books on their terms. I did not want their money. I had my own. All I had ever wanted was for them to call the event by its proper name: abandonment, theft. And now, in the silence, in the tears and the bowed heads, I had it. The truth was on the table. right next to the $10. I gently let go of my grandmother's hand. I leaned over and picked up the small plastic-sleeved square. I wiped a drop of moisture from the porch railing off the plastic. "I keep this," I said, my voice calm. The founder voice again. "I keep it to remember where I started, to remember the cost of a bad route." I tucked it back into my wallet. I turned to my mother, who was now just weeping, and my father, who was just a hollow shell. "I built my own table," I said. It was my final report. "I've been building it for 10 years. There are a lot of seats, but the empty seats are not for you. They are for the next kids who are waiting." I looked at Aunt Melissa. I walked over and gave her the small bouquet of wildflowers from the limo. "These are for you, Auntie. Thank you for being on time." I kissed her cheek. I touched my grandmother's shoulder. I did not hug my parents. I did not offer a hand to my sister. There would be no family photo, no moment of reconciliation, no false, healing closure for a photograph. There was just a clean, respectful, and permanent distance. "Jocelyn," my father whispered, as I passed him. I paused, but I did not turn back. "Goodbye, Father." I walked off the porch. My heels didn't click on the wood, but they did when I reached the gravel path to the car. Click, click, click. The sound of my own, steady rhythm, the sound of a clock that was no longer broken, the sound of me, walking away, on my own schedule. My driver, who had been standing patiently by the rear door, saw me. He opened the door. I slid into the back seat, onto the cool, clean leather. The door closed. It was not a slam, like the SUV. It was a soft, expensive, weighted thud, a full stop, the end of a sentence. The engine started, a low, powerful hum. The car pulled away from the curb. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I looked forward, at the dashboard clock, but I caught a glimpse of them in the rearview mirror. My mother, my father, and my sister, standing on the porch, 3 small, dark figures, huddled together under the weak, festive lights. They were shrinking, growing smaller and smaller, until they were just another part of the dark, just another part of the town I was leaving, again. The scene was finally renaming itself. It wasn't home. It wasn't family. It was just a place I used to be, a data point, an origin. Mile 0. The drive from the community center was quiet. The thrum of the engine was a low, steady vibration, a world away from the emotional static I had just left behind. We moved through the dark, sleeping streets of Maple Ridge, past the town square, past the high school. "Sir," I said to the driver. My voice was calm in the quiet car. "Yes, Ms. Nunez." "There's one more stop I'd like to make, the bus stop on the county line, just past the water tower, the old one." He nodded, not questioning. "Right away." He pulled the car onto the same gravel shoulder I had stood on 10 years ago. He idled the engine, the headlights cutting 2 perfect, white cones into the darkness, illuminating the small, 3-sided shelter. He made a move to get out, to open my door. "No, stay here," I said gently. "I won't be long." I stepped out of the car. The night air was cool. The only sound was the one I remembered, the one that had been the soundtrack to my first night of freedom. The sick, electric bzzz of the orange sodium lamp. It was still there, still fighting the moths. I walked over to the shelter. The bench was there, still painted that awful, bright green. The paint was already chipping, showing the rust underneath. Some things you can't just paint over. I looked at the schedule, still taped behind the plastic. 10:45 p.m. Of course, time, in this place, had a memory. It held on to its old patterns. I had the small bouquet of wildflowers in my hand, the ones that had been waiting for me in the car, the ones I had saved. They were for this. I reached into my wallet. I took out the plastic sleeve. I slid the $10 bill out of it. For 10 years, I had kept this. It was my anger. It was my proof. It was the stone in my shoe, the thing that reminded me to keep walking. Now, it was just a piece of paper. I stepped into the shelter. I placed the wildflowers on the bench, a splash of life against the chipping green paint, and next to them, I laid the $10 bill, smoothing it flat. A $10 bill and some flowers, a payment, a symbolic closing of a loop, a debt paid, not by them, but by me, to the universe, for services rendered. I stepped back, and I whispered the words into the buzzing dark. This is where I was left, and this is where I started. A new sound joined the buzzing. My phone, in my pocket, a soft, digital chime, not a text message, a system alert. I pulled it out. The screen was bright. It was a notification from the TracePath dashboard, a high-priority alert I had set for myself. Delivery complete. EOC School Warehouse, on time, 10:48 p.m. The emergency truck, the one carrying medical supplies for the rural clinic network, the one I had routed through the storm-damaged roads in West Virginia, it had arrived. It was on time. I smiled, a real smile, a small, complete smile, there in the dark. A sudden sharp montage of memories, not like a nightmare, but like a data trace. The scalding water in the harbor and hearth sink. My hands red and raw. The smell of old coffee and frying onions. Mrs. Alvarez, sliding me a plate of leftover pot roast. Luis Ramos, showing me how to slide the tray, not lift it. My first notebook, the one with the grid lines, filled with server paths, the first Excel sheet, the red and green squares, Hank Dobson's tired face, his eyes wide, saying, "A triangle?" The smell of diesel in my first real desk, the blinking green dots, my fireflies, coming alive on the map. They were not ghosts. They were not traumas. They were steps. They were rungs on a ladder I had built myself. Out of the wreckage, they were the path. I looked back at the bench. The wind was calm. The $10 bill sat there, still, next to the flowers. It wasn't an invoice anymore. It wasn't a weapon. It was a bookmark. A bookmark in a book I had just finished reading. A book I was now placing, gently, back on the shelf. I lifted my phone again. I opened the TracePath administrative map, the one only I could access. I zoomed in on my current location, the blue dot of my own phone, right on top of this gravel patch. I pressed and held my finger on the screen. Add POI. I typed in the name. Mile 0, Maple Ridge Stop. I added a note. Origin. I saved it. It was now a permanent, charted point in my company's universe. Then, I opened my email. I went to my drafts. There was one, waiting. It was addressed to my lawyer and my foundation's administrator. Subject: Activate Mile 0 Grant. The body was simple. Please activate the Mile 0 Annual Scholarship Program. Effective immediately. Fund the first 10 grants for this year. 10 grants, one for every dollar they had left me. 10 grants for 10 kids who were aging out of the foster system, who were stepping into the world with nothing but a diploma and the clothes on their backs. I hit send. I had rerouted the money. I had rerouted the meaning. The $10 was no longer a symbol of abandonment. It was now the seed funding for a new generation. The hiss of air brakes. A bus, its lights cutting through the night, pulled up. It was the 10:45, right on time. The doors folded open with that familiar, pneumatic sigh. The driver, a new face, a young woman, looked down at me. She saw the limo. She saw my silk dress. She saw the woman standing by the gravel, and she was confused. "You getting on, ma'am?" she called out. I looked up at her. I looked at the warm, empty bus, the same one I had shaken my head at 10 years ago. And I smiled, a warm smile, from me to her, from one driver to another. "No, thank you," I said. "I have my own schedule." She nodded, as if that made all the sense in the world. The doors hissed shut. The bus pulled away, its red taillights disappearing into the same dark curve. I got back into the limo. The door closed with its quiet, final thud. "Home, Ms. Nunez?" my driver asked. "Yes," I said. "Home?" The limo pulled away, its tires crunching on the gravel. I looked out the back window. the bus stop, with its offering of flowers and its $10 bookmark, grew smaller. The single orange lamp, my old angry sun, reflected on the glass, a long horizontal streak of light. It wasn't orange anymore. It looked, for all the world, like the first line of a new sunrise. Justice, I thought, isn't a loud noise. It's not a courtroom gavel. It's not a bitter speech. Justice is the punctuality of kindness. It's the truck arriving on time. It's the scholarship being funded. It's the quiet, relentless, forward movement of a system that is, finally, working. My phone chimed. A soft text alert. It was Aunt Melissa. Got home. Found the flowers. I am so proud of you. Jocelyn. So proud. I smiled. I opened my replies. I found the small, simple icon of a map. A pin dropped at a destination, and I added a simple, red heart. I sent it. She would understand. I leaned my head back against the leather. My work was done. My map was drawn. I closed my eyes, just for 60 seconds. The old ritual, the one I did in my office, in front of the big map. I didn't see the trucks, the green dots, the routes. I saw the map in my head. I saw the girl at the bus stop. I saw the woman in the limo. I saw the lines connecting them. And for the first time, in that 60 seconds, my mind was perfectly, completely quiet. The map was at peace. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Please comment below. Let's connect and share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and give us your support by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by so many more.